Yep, good.
Right, everybody, we are live. First of all, somebody online, can you make sure that we are live, that we can hear, you can hear us? Thumbs up, thank you very much. Welcome everybody to the council meeting of today's date. Some opening comments with regard to me. By the way, we have had the council prayer this morning, so we can dispense with that. I'm calling for apologies. I have an apology from Coral, Councillor Coral. I have an apology from Councillor Angus Gordon, who may need to leave early. We have a number of people that are on Zoom for this meeting, obviously, and I welcome our Chief Executive, Peter Beggs, on Zoom, and a number of staff.
Councillor Hero was an apology.
And an apology from Councillor Hero. So, first of all, I'll move that those apologies be accepted. Seconded to that, Councillor Belsh, and those in favour, please raise your hands. Thank you. Carried. Some opening comments. We have a very heavy agenda today, and it's not only this agenda. We have a public excluded section which has a heavy agenda. I'm going to have to push through fairly quickly to get through the workload today. What I am saying is we are starting now. We will break for 10 minutes at 3 o'clock. And if at 5:30 we have not finished the council agenda, I'll be calling the meeting to a close. At that stage, we would be overdue for a break, and good governorship would not happen if you drag it on. So that's the time frame I intend operating. Any questions around that? No, thank you. Moving straight along. I'll remind councillors around the conflict of interest declarations. That should be a given. The confirmation of order of business, I haven't had any substantive change. Go to the Chief Executive. Is there anything that I'm unaware of in your position? No, thank you very much. So the order of business will be as stated. I'm looking for the confirmation of minutes. Starting on page 6, looking for alterations and corrections. Page 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Councillor Dalgety.
Page 9.
Yep.
I just, Councillor Rauka, under the conflict of interest declarations, it says she's part of the Runanga in Taipei. Is that supposed to be Martin?
I think it should be Martin, and I'd be happy on her behalf to seek that change. I think it's an admin change.
Thank you.
Moving on, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 and 17, etc. Any alterations or corrections, please? Would somebody like to so move as amended? Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Seconded. Councillor Carter. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you very much. That deals with that. The follow-up actions from the previous meeting, starting page 19, and rather than go through each one of those separately, I'm asking for comment around them.
Can I just make a comment on item 9, Mr. Lance Collier's letter that was sent today? So just advising you that he has received that.
So that can be now closed.
Yes.
Sorry, I should have passed to you first for comment. Anything further from councillors around the follow-up actions? No? Okay. Would somebody like to so move that they be received? Thank you, Councillor Duncan. Councillor Dalgety. Those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. The Mayor's report, starting on page, sorry, I'm just getting rid of something else coming up on my screen. Starting on page 25, I'm certainly going to take it as a read document. I'll take any questions. I would like to make another couple of little comments. First of all, in the Mayor's engagement, there are a huge number of appointments that I have that are not necessarily listed, especially if I'm going to speak to individual people. And one example of that is on the 26th, the Saturday through 27th, I've met with about 4 different groups. And the reason I raise this, I met with the one of the principals of the Putarino water supply scheme. So this is a rated scheme within our district. It needs urgent upgrade, and I note that there's going to be a public forum in the future, as I understand it, Peter. But I would note that, in my opinion, we have an obligation to look at this work. So I would ask staff to be in the position to have a paper that comes to council at the earliest possible opportunity.
Your Worship, I might take that opportunity to agree that the author of the letter or the email to you and I I've approved for him to speak at public forum at council meeting in April. And I already have 2 of my staff working on that with the individual, so I'm happy to provide or to take an undertaking to provide a paper to council as part of April's council meeting.
Thank you. The next piece that I'd like to mention is there has been quite a lot of discussion around council's position with regard to the 3 waters. And the relationship that we have with government, and in particular the relationship of the DIA working group that I co-chair. There's been a fair amount of public interest, and first of all, I'll quite categorically say for those that are online listening, no, I'm not paid for that work, and it is a chance, in my view, for us to be able to influence government to seek changes, particularly with things that the sector is unhappy with. However, in terms of making the public aware, it is my intention to look to hold public meetings in Bulls, Martin, Taihape, to update people on exactly where the law stands, what the government's position is, to possibly invite a position from an opposition, and council's position and the DIA work, and then open it up for all sorts of questions. I'll take any questions around that and any other parts of my report or engagements. I think I've made everybody gun shy about the amount of work we've got to go through. Thank you very much.
Councillor Duncan's got her hand up.
Was that a clap or a hand up, Councillor?
That's my version of hand up. Unfortunately, this device that I'm on only has 2 options. It's thumbs up or clap. So you're getting the clap. I just want to say I applaud that. Thank you very much, Your Worship, for the willingness to schedule those meetings. I think it will be great for our community to have more clarification around this whole issue.
Yeah, so we'll put that as a part of the adoption of my report as an action to come out of that. Anything else? Thank you very much. I'll move that my report be received. Looking for a seconder to that. Councillor Duncan seconding. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. I'll move to item number 9, the Chief Executive's report. First of all, I'll ask somebody to receive it while Peter's coming off mute. Could somebody, Councillor Belsham moving, Councillor Gordon seconding. Those in favour, carried. Thank you. Peter.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will take it as read up until point 6, and we'll pause to see if items 1 to 5 require any clarification from the members.
Any questioning around items 1 through to 5? Yes, Councillor Dalgety.
Can we please just add Hunterville? I assume that's Queen's Park, Hunterville, on item 1.2.
Yes, just as a further explanation
Thank
as to
you.
where that is. Yeah,
Yeah.
certainly.
Gordon has got his hand up.
Councillor Gordon.
Yes, my query is around the RFS improvements, and in item 5.3 it says this is expected to be by the end of March or early April. Is there any update on how the IT staff are getting on with testing the performance of this new bit of kit?
Carol, can I ask you a comment, please?
Sure, I can answer that. I've spoken to the team this week and the testing has gone really well. There's no issues. They're going to roll it onto the live site very shortly, and concurrently with that, our staff will be trained on these improvements. And we've asked Magic if that could happen this week. They, like the rest of us, are down a few staff at the moment, so it may now be next week, but it is imminent. So we're still on schedule for early April. And I can report the testing has worked really well. So we're not anticipating any issues, but we just want to make sure our staff are trained before we go live with this, so that there's no undue foreseen circumstances that we're not aware of.
Your Worship, could I make a quick suggestion? Once we've got this live and up and running, we make a pitch, especially to our rural communities, about the RFS system and this new way we're dealing with it, to really get them using it and get some confidence back in the system.
So I'm happy to take that on board and make sure it's widely known that these improvements are now in place, and our preferences for everyone to contact us through these mechanisms.
Just a question around that. For instance, I dealt with somebody the other day, it made me cough, that was not online. They can also go to the 0800 number, can't they?
That's right. We publicise that as the best way to contact us if they don't have internet access.
Yeah, so I passed that information on.
I shall continue, Your Worship, to point 6, which is just highlighting the annual remit process. Councillor Duncan, I see a hand up. Was that a question on this item?
I apologise. It was actually just a point around the staff training with the RFS. I just wondered if that was going to be including things such as training for all the centres around the Simply technology that we're implementing for resource consents. So sorry, I'm going off topic perhaps.
Okay.
I can respond to that one. Simply is a different provider. Magic is doing our RFS system, so Magic will be doing the training on that one.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Simply is also just building consents, not resource consents. But another thing, if we are going back to point 5, is just to remember that this is improving our request for service system. I think all of me and my team acknowledge it's not been the best in terms of our ability to give feedback, and the systems the system that Carol and her team have been working on are really meeting what we and you would expect from such a system. Just to remind you that this is the request for service. We also have, and you would have received it some months ago, Carol and her team has a complaints process, and a request for service and a complaint, two very different things. So a complaint is where someone is not getting the service they require, having gone through a normal process. and so there's an escalation and complaints process, and that's clearly listed on our website as well. Your Worship, did you want to speak a little on the remit process and perhaps your expectations of elected members?
Yes, there are a couple of different ways that you can get a remit to local government. So for those listening online, a remit is taking literally a notice of motion to our governing body, local government New Zealand, as an action that we require them as a body that represents us to engage with government. So for example, if you said that, you know, dangerous dogs need to be banned from New Zealand, and I'm taking a wild example, please don't read anything into that. But if you took that as a remit and said, this is what we want as a council, and you took it to local government New Zealand, if it passed the agreement of the majority of councils around New Zealand, you'd be requiring the sector to engage with government to do something about it. So how do you get a remit on the table? There are several different pathways, one of which is going to 5 councils and getting a combined local voice of 5 councils. There is another pathway of going to a zone meeting or a rural and provincial meeting and getting a vote across those forums. So we do have a programmed meeting that will be on Zoom very shortly, not today, but in the near future, for our Zone 3 meeting. If you have an interest of taking something as a remit forward, then you need to put something to me, as I am a co-chair of Zone 3. And we look to put it on the table at that forum. So yeah, thank you, Peter. That is the process, that is what it's meant to achieve.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll pause for any questions to that. Move on to point 7, which is my response to the changing COVID-19 protection framework, and particularly that around mandates and the My Vaccine Pass. You'll see it as, I'll take it as read. There are 2 regular or weekly revisions that myself and the exec team will go through. One of those is our general encouragement for staff to work from home. And secondly, that the libraries will only operate a click and collect service. Excuse me, a click and collect service. So that they are reviewed on a weekly basis. The review was undertaken today, and that hasn't changed. So that the libraries will still remain a click and collect service only, and staff will still be encouraged to work from home with the review in a week's time. The reason for that is that the numbers in our district are still climbing, or at least haven't changed in a reverse direction. And both of those settings are around the number of cases in our districts rather than a central government setting. And the view of myself and the exec team, and ultimately my decision, is that the libraries will have the click and collect because of a small number of staff we have. At least this way, we are more likely to run a skeleton service in the click and collect service than if our staff were to contract COVID and those services have been shut down for 7 days minimum.
Thank you. Any questions from councillors with regard to this?
Yes.
Yes. Councillor Belsham.
Thank you, Your Worship. Peter, just in regards to, in your report, you've said the decision will be reviewed on the 31st of March in regards with the libraries and information centres remaining closed. So you've reviewed that today out for another week, is that correct? Are you reviewing it in a week's time?
Correct.
What are the, I guess, what are the trigger points for you to make a decision on opening those up to the public again, opening the libraries up to the public again?
Bear in mind that they're not closed. They do have a click and collect service, and we are in direct contact with many of our community via phone to arrange other ways of getting services to them. The measure is purely on the number of active and new cases in our district.
So have you set a target on that, or you're basically just making a decision on whether they're reducing at a certain rate?
There are no precise metrics we're using, but the fact is that they're not coming down at the moment.
Okay. I'm just thinking more of the access to computers, where some of our community don't have that internet access, and that's probably a limiting factor. So just to get some sort of idea on the decision-making process around opening those up again.
Yeah, I would anticipate that it'll be a small number of weeks before we reopen, but we need to see those cases, both active and new cases, trending down.
Okay. No, well, yeah, that comment provides some sort of signal, so that's fine. Thank you.
Your Worship, in the past that I've made this decision, although this is not a recommendation, you have opted to provide an endorsement to my decision. I can pause and allow you to make a recommendation from there if you wish.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity, Peter. First of all, it also forms part of my council reports and stuff that I've put in the paper. I have said that we have endorsed, first of all, that it is absolutely your right to make these options, that is a position for you to call. Council has previously indicated to endorse them, quite rightly, as you point out. Councillors, would anybody be prepared to put an endorsement motion on the? Well, I will look. I'll move that council endorses the decision-making process that the chief executive has followed. Seconded, Councillor Wilson. Does anybody wish to speak to it? I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? Thank you. Consider it done. Carried.
Worship, point 8 on the Taipei Town Hall development. We are starting a better business case process. You may recall for the Martin Civic Centre, we utilised the services of some councillors to help us in that process. We have recommended that the 3 Northern Ward councillors assist us in the Taipei Town Hall better business case. And so my resolution, or my recommendation, correction, number 2, asks for that.
First of all, to those Northern Ward councillors, do you all agree? As bearing in mind that Tracy's not in the room, or can I put it this way, have you had their agreeance support?
I had, Your Worship, it's called the thumbs up on the screen just now, but I haven't from Councillor Hiro.
Okay, thank you. So, look, I'm quite happy to move that. Looking for a seconder to it.
Yep, happy to do that.
Councillor Duncan, I'll take you as a seconder. Any questions or anybody wish to speak to it? I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Worship. My final point is on point 9, which is the Bulls Historical Society. Elected members may recall there was a resolution for council to provide a loan last year to the Hunterville Sport and Recreation Trust. They subsequently did not draw down that loan because they found funding elsewhere. As a precedent, the Bulls Historical Society have come to us to look for a loan to cover the earthquake strengthening of the Bulls Library. Members may recall that the Bulls Library is intending to be used, or is in a lease situation. We haven't concluded that lease, but where they would be required to earthquake strengthen the building and turn it into a war or museum. So they have asked for 159,000 plus GST. That was a quotation or an estimate they've been given. Yes, I'll leave that to the recommendation. Any questions?
Questions from councillors, please. First of all, Councillor Dalgety. Councillor.
Thank you, Peter. I'm just trying to understand in my own mind a couple of things. First of all, clarification, the Bulls Historical Society is an incorporated society. It's not just a group of people.
My understanding it is, but
I think
if you want that checked, we could do so. But my understanding is that it is.
It does list that in the heading of their document that they're an incorporated society.
Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. And then I'm just wanting to understand, so when we talk here about them doing their own due diligence, what do we need to be protected around? Like obviously earthquake strengthening is an incredibly specialist type of work. So what, how do we know that they're not employing a cowboy to do this?
A good question, Councillor, that has been discussed. Peter.
The only way we can ensure that they're not employing a cowboy is that any work they do will need to be checked by our regulatory team. And so ultimately, it'll have to comply with the Building Act.
Sure, yeah.
And so our regular team will be involved as it would be in any other earthquake thing.
Okay.
Councillor Carter.
Regarding the cowboy group, I think these people that they're looking at have served Rangitikei District Council work as well as Horowhenua. So it's one that's been recommended to them.
Thank you. Look, I'd like somebody to put a motion on the floor so we're actually speaking to a recommendation or motion.
I'd be happy to move.
As it stands.
Council, sorry, Your Worship, that that council agrees to grant a loan to the Bulls Historical Society for 159,000 plus GST to undertake the earthquake strengthening to the Bulls Library, the old Bulls Library.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm looking for a seconder to that. I think it's probably appropriate. It does come from Bulls, so I'll go for Councillor Carter. Councillor Carter, you're seconding. Do you wish to speak to your motion?
Just to say that we have set precedent in offering that opportunity to the Hunterville Sport and Recreation Trust. This building is still a council-owned building, and this organisation is willing to undertake the preservation of this building for them to be able to utilise it. So, but it is still ultimately a council-owned piece of property. So I fully support the works that they're doing, and I think this is an appropriate way to show that support towards that group.
Thank you. I'll take speakers to it. I have Councillor Wilson. Councillor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Supporting the motion, there's just a couple of quick little points there I'd like to note in the Chief Executive's report. At 9.3, the agreement, which is for an unsecured loan, also provides for the loan to be repaid instalments and penalties should a repayment instalment be missed. The point that I make there is I don't think it's appropriate to ask what those instalments are in this public forum, but I would like councillors to be made aware of what the terms of this loan is with regards to repayments. We don't know how long it is or what schedule's been put in. Now, as the Historical Society down there in Bulls have made the application, I certainly think it is a sensitive matter that we shouldn't be discussing in a public forum, but I would like councillors to be aware of what the structure of the loan payments are. But certainly speaking in favour of the motion, but I would like councillors to just be aware of that as a governance body. And secondly, noting at 9.4 that the firm selected has been suggested by council staff. So just clarifying that in there. Although it does say it does not mean that it's an endorsement or recommendation, it was one that was suggested. If there's any other comment to that, happy to hear it. Those are my 2 points. Speaking in favour.
So would you?
If I may, Your Worship, I want to be very specific about 9.4 and the word suggestion. I've spoken and emailed Mr. Sharland on this issue. That council do not have a view, or opinion, or recommendation, suggestion, or anything otherwise that implies that they should be speaking with this organisation. Simply, it was an offer of an organisation that could undertake the work. And I've made it very clear to Mr. Sharland that he is required to undertake his own due diligence to ensure that organisation is sufficient, etc., etc. So in no way will council accept any liability for them choosing that particular organisation.
Thank you. In terms of the motion, in terms of your question, Councillor Wilson, about transparency back to council, I'll go to the mover of the motion and ask whether the motion as it stands you want put to the vote, or whether you would contemplate a condition being included in your motion to ensure that accountability comes back to council in some shape or form.
Look, in the report under 9.3, that the loan structure would be conducted on the same basis as the draft loan agreement that was prepared for the Hunterville Sport and Recreation Trust. So we actually have been through a process to determine what the structure would be, and I'm happy that it still sits under that structure. I appreciate where Councillor Wilson's point was coming from, but I know council has been over this process under that through the Hunterville Sport and Recreation Trust draft agreement. And I'm confident that that covers off any concerns that may be there.
Councillor Wilson, does that address your concern?
Not 100%, Your Worship, because referring back to the draft agreement with the Hunterville Sport and Recreation Trust, I do not believe that that actually had a loan term and repayment schedule attached to it. I may well be mistaken that, and my apologies to council if I've missed that. I don't believe that agreement also had a structure attached to it.
Okay, we'll deal with that as a secondary item to the motion on the floor. I have other speakers, Councillor Dalgety, Councillor Wilson, speaking to the motion on the floor. Councillor Dalgety.
I'm in favour of the motion, and I just would like to acknowledge that since these reports have come through, Carol has sent through a recommendation by the Manawatu District Council that they have had success with this contractor that they're looking to use around the strengthening. I think, look, it's a beautiful old building in a town. We've got a group of passionate people who are keen to work on making it happen. The costs are only going to go up. I'm pleased to support it.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson, I'm not sure whether the note that I've got that you wanted to speak has already been dealt with. Is that the case? Thank you. Any further speakers? Otherwise, I'll go back to right of reply. Councillor Belsham?
No, I'll forfeit that, right?
Right, I'll put it, no right of reply needed. I'll then put it to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hands. Those against, carried. Thank you very much. Councillor Wilson, now do you wish to take the issue around your finance recordability further?
Yes, Your Worship, and thank you for that. And whether or not it's an undertaking that the Chief Executive may wish just to take on board, simply that before it's signed or something, we could see what the makeup of this final loan agreement actually is. I would just feel a little more comfortable knowing what it is that the council is entering into, the terms and conditions of the loan. The loan is a loan, and I support the work that this group is doing. I I have had a conversation with Mr. Sharland about it, just in the interest of transparency. I know that they have several applications for funding out there. I know that their request is genuine, the fact that they don't want to see the cost of this project skyrocket. It's likely to do that in the foreseeable future, so I endorse this, but I just would like to know what the actual terms of the loan are at some stage. Happy if that's offline, circulated to councillors via an action from the Chief Executive.
I'll just clarify here, we've got an undertaking on the board that the Chief Executive provide the terms and conditions of the loan to elected members via email. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you, Peter, for giving that direction.
Can I just clarify that the email is not seeking agreement or resolution, it's only for advice?
For information.
For information, thank you, yes. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. We carry on. Is there anything else, Peter? All right, thank you very much. That brings us to the end of item 9, the Chief Executive's report. There's nothing that the councillors want to ask of the Chief Executive. I'll move on. Thank you. Moving to item number 10, these are reports for the decision, and the first one is 10.1, the adoption of supporting documents and documents with simultaneous consultation of the for this year's annual plan. I'll move to Carol in just a second, sorry, Ms. Gordon, for comment around that. But we have a series of things that we have to do. These are legislative positions, and this is really focused on whether there is anything in those documents that you object to, would be my view. Ms. Gordon.
Yes, and there's a requirement to adopt the supporting information before we adopt the consultation document. So the draft annual plan is actually a supporting document to the consultation document, and also the long-term plan is a supporting document. Even though it's adopted last year, it still has to be adopted as supporting information to our consultation process. So it really is, it's got to happen before the next item. And also the simultaneous consultation, we've rolled this into one agenda item. So these, you'll be aware, we went through the proposed schedule of fees and charges at our workshops. So that's now adopting this for consultation, as well as the draft rates remission policy and the draft rates remission policy for Maori freehold land.
Thank you. I'll move first of all the recommendation we received this bunch of documents. Looking for somebody to move. Councillor Ash moving, Councillor Gordon seconding. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you. Recommendation 2, I'll move from the chair that the council adopts the following documents as information relied, and this is the draft annual plan and the adopted 21-31 long-term plan. Looking for a seconder to that, and then open it for discussion. Councillor Lambert seconding. Before I put it to a vote, are there any questions or any speakers that wish to speak to this?
Can we make it?
Sorry?
Can we just give an update on
Yes, certainly.
So just with the draft annual plan, you were sent this on Tuesday. As I said in the covering note to you, it still has to go through our final design, proofreading and formatting. So that will all be done before consultation next week. We've already identified a few minor errors in it, so that falls within our ability to change the document. But there is, if you do have any glaring errors or anything, if you can let me know, then we'll make those changes prior to it going out. This is a draft. This is what we consult on, as well as our consultation document with our community.
And I'd just like to remind the councillors and those people online, in terms of these processes, councillors, you've been already through this process with an LTP process. So this is putting out a document for people to be able to comment on and submit to. The way will be positions or organisations or communities or individuals that seek change within the documents, it comes back to council for consideration. There is also an opportunity for, in the fullness of time, for council staff to come to council as the governance arm of council to say there are some further changes that we think you would need to consider. Hopefully those will be more minor in nature. So this is not the end of the deal. I'll take questions. Councillor Dalgety.
Thank you, Mrs. Gordon, for this work. Look, I just need you please to outline for me the process. I am aware in Hunterville, the Hunterville Community Sports Trust, which for clarity, I want to make sure everyone realises not the Hunterville Sport and Recreation Trust. The Hunterville Sports Community Trust has a turf in Hunterville at the school. This now needs recarpeting. And I'm just not aware of when is the best time for that group to try and get something into the annual plan. This project was not happening at the time of our long-term plan.
Thanks, Councillor Dalgety. The time to do it is when the submissions open, which is the end of next week. So what I would suggest is that group gets a submission together and submits it to us by the closing date, and then it will come back to council as part of the hearings and deliberations process, and they'll have the opportunity either to speak and also for council to deliberate on their request. So any organisation, not just the one you're talking about, has the opportunity to provide a submission to us.
Thank you.
I'd just like to add to that, and yes, this is an issue that I have raised. Ms. Gordon is absolutely correct in her answer, but I'd also like to note that council as an organisation continues on in this financial year. There may well be minor matters that people bring to council prior to June, and I'm not suggesting for a second that this is a minor matter, by the way, where council could consider, unbudgeted expenditure, for example. We still have an operating process throughout the way that we govern council. But for matters of this nature, absolutely correct. It would be an annual plan submission basis, and would encourage submission from the group.
Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Your Worship, for Ms. Gordon acknowledging receipt of the email that you sent on Tuesday, and forgive me if the answer to my question was in that. With regards to some minor formatting and grammatical checking and that type of thing, at what stage does this get reviewed by audit?
Audit do not audit the annual plan. They only audit the long-term plan. Okay. Or if we had to do a long-term plan amendment this year, they would have audited it, but they don't audit an annual plan.
Thank you for that answer.
Which saves us in excess of $100,000.
Thank you.
Huge cost difference between the two processes.
Thank you.
Anything further from councillors? Right, I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you very much. Moving through to, that takes us through to 10.3, is it? So,
10.2.
10 point. Is there another recommendation? Yeah, adoption of the framing, is it?
Oh, sorry.
Recommendation 3.
Recommendation 3. Recommendation 3 is that council adopts for consultation using the special consultative procedure simultaneously with the framing 22-23, the associated documents, the proposed scheduled fees and charges, the draft rates remission policy and draft rates remission policy for Māori freehold land. Looking for a mover to that. Thank you, Councillor Gordon. Seconded, go Councillor Wilson.
Just a question.
A question? Go ahead.
So the draft rates remission policy is shown there. It shows additions and then stuff crossed out in red. Is that how it goes out for consultation, or is it being developed more into what the end document will look like?
Yes, the reason we did that was to show you what the changes were.
Right.
And they get taken off before it goes out for
So
consultation.
the consultation document will look different to this.
That's right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I
Just wanted to clarify that.
and then assumed, yeah.
Because it looked difficult to understand if it's going out to the public arena. Right, that's clarified it. Thank you.
Any further questions around this? So these are, this is work that you've had at your fingertips for quite some time in a series of council meetings, workshops. Who was the mover? Councillor Gordon, do you wish to speak to it?
No, I don't wish to speak, but I have a question for Mrs. Gordon. Carol, what's that absolute deadline for councillor feedback to your team?
On which?
On these documents, because you've got draft but they're about to go out. So you're asking for feedback. I'm just wanting to make sure everybody gets the right date.
Monday at 5 o'clock.
Right, thank you.
Oh, that was short and to the point. Any other speakers?
Thursday at 5.
2 o'clock today.
Right, I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour?
Right.
Those against? Carried. That moves us to 10.2, the adoption of the framing, the consultation document for the annual plan. These are recommendations that come out of it. Recommendation 1, that the adoption, report be received. Mover, seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Duncan moving. Seconded. Thank you, Councillor Gordon. Any questions? Councillor Duncan, do you wish to speak to it? Thank you, go ahead.
Thank you. I have real concerns about this. It says that the documents will come out simultaneously with the consultation. So I'm just really concerned that those documents are ready and on the desk for people to be able to read them. I know that a month seems a long time, but for people to start submitting, the submission period is the same as the consultation document coming out. So for people to start submitting, I think those documents need to be available. I mean, I'd like to see them available beforehand, but my experience last year with the long-term plan was that the documents were delayed, and it's not one person's fault, but for the public, it becomes very tricky if they are wanting to access a document, it's not there for them to then have a submission that is a period that is very finite.
So I think if I understand what you're saying is you want to make sure that the consultation process cannot formally start until the documents are in the public space.
Ideally.
Okay, can I respond? Councillor Duncan, everything, and I give you my word on this one, everything will be absolutely ready by next Friday when consultation opens on all of these. The consultation document, which subject to any minor amendments you provide me today, is ready to go. It's being produced in-house. We don't need to wait for printers to actually produce it. We're copying it in-house. We've got it online ready to go. The online submission form is ready to go. So everything is actually ready way before Friday. It'll probably be, but we won't open submissions till Friday, but everything will be available from Friday.
Are you okay with that answer?
Thank you, Mrs. Gordon. That's great. There will be one tricky thing about hard copies if I guess we do click and collect for those from libraries and information centres, etc.
Yes, we acknowledge that, and we'll try and make it as simple as possible using New World, etc. in Taihape as well.
Thank you very much.
Any further questions? Otherwise, I'll put it to a vote. I'll put it to vote. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Carried. Recommendation 2, that council resolves to adopt the framing document as a consultation document in terms of, this is in terms of section 95A of the Local Government Act, subject to minor editorial formatting. So this is essentially the same thing, really. Could somebody please move this? Councillor Wilson moving, seconded Councillor Duncan. I don't think there's any discussion needed. I'll put it to a vote. I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you very much.
I was just going to make a point about some.
Certainly.
Sorry, I was just going to make a point about some consultation, and I think on page 2, I've talked about drop-in sessions on the annual plan. And talking to Katrina, we actually have 3 that we could coincide with the spatial plan. And I think that might be a sensible thing to do. We're getting really good feedback and turnouts from the spatial plan consultation. So marrying this with the Martin consultation, Ratana, and also Turakina, I think will help with this, and we propose to do that, work with the Mayor and the relevant councillors on that.
Thank you very much. Anything further from you with regard to this? No. Councillor Dalgety.
Thank you, Mrs. Gordon. I'm wondering if you can please send out invitations around the Facebook live sessions as well to us, so we don't miss them.
Do you want to make a point about that, Andy?
Yes, look, there may be a number of groups that when this document is out in space, ask to speak to council or to engage in a process of communication around the annual plan. There may be sector groups that we haven't thought of. We're more than happy to respond to those requests, whether it's by Zoom or whether it's by sector meetings or community meetings. What I would do is encourage people to get in contact with us as early as possible, because if they leave it to the last minute, it becomes literally too difficult to timetable.
I'll just make a point about the Facebook live sessions. Everything was sort of depending on today's meeting. So if everyone's comfortable with this, that calendar invites will go out for that. And we'll also work with our new comms person, Tiana, to form some questions and decide who's going to speak on which topics at each of those sections. So there's more sessions, so there's more information to come out.
And those sessions have already had some planning around them already, haven't they?
So Councillor Duncan, I think.
Councillor Duncan, thumbs up. Anything else with regard to this whole raft of annual plan things? No questions, concerns? Moving along to the 10.3, the Triennial Elections. Who's going to take us through this? While you're thinking that, can we just receive the report? Could somebody so move, please? Councillor Dalgety moving. Councillor Gordon seconding. Those in favour? Thank you. Carried.
Okay, so you may all be aware there's an election this year in October. So there's a number of procedural things that will come to you, but this is the first. I'm the Deputy Electoral Officer, and we do have Warwick Lamp from elections.com as our Electoral Officer. So today's decision is around how, if you want to make a decision, is around how you want names to be arranged on the voting documents. And there's 3 options available to you. One is alphabetic order of surname, which historically this council has had, pseudo-random and random. And I've outlined in the paper what each of those mean. And so it's up to you to decide how you want these to look. If you choose not to make a decision, it reverts back to an alphabetical But I've also listed there what our neighbours are doing, and also there's a strong move across the country to go to random. So I'm not trying to influence, but there is a strong move to go to random. So happy to take any questions.
Yeah, look, I'll endorse LGNZ's principle that it should be going to a random assortment. There is definite data that suggests if your a surname begins with A, you're more likely to be elected than somebody whose surname begins with X, if there's very many people with a surname X. But no, there should be a principle here where everybody stands an absolute even chance. And what I would suggest to councillors, that a councillor makes a recommendation along those lines.
Councillor Lambert's got his hand up.
Councillor Lambert.
Hi, I'm more than happy to recommend that we go down the random line. I just echo what you said, Your Worship. I think it's a far more even playing field if the names are randomly selected, and the electors, instead of just, if they've got three options, just ticking the first three boxes, they actually have to do a bit of research on each candidate. I think it's a lot better. So, yep, more than happy to recommend random.
So that we're speaking to a motion, look for a seconder to that. Councillor Belsham seconding. Oh, I've got other people wanting to third it even. So, Councillor Lambert, it's your motion. Do you wish to speak further to it?
No, happy on what I've said.
Councillors, anybody wish to speak to this?
Yeah.
Sorry?
Councillor Belsham.
Councillor Belsham, beginning with a B.
Yes, yeah, well, I'm just going to open with that. And probably Councillor Ash would support me as well. That whilst it's been beneficial potentially to have a very high-ranking letter that your surname begins with, I understand the reasonings behind having a random type naming process on the voting paper. So I do support that. Always wondered why the reasons would be to stick with the alphabetic thing, and it does tend to give some advantage to the first names on the list. So yes, I support the random order to give everyone a fair opportunity. And Councillor Wilson will probably back that up, being a W.
Bearing in mind the timeframes, does anybody have a contrary view that they wish to put on the table? Right, I'll take it straight back to any need for right of reply, Councillor Lambert. I'll put it to the vote then. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. That is a significant change. Our council has avoided this position for a long time. So, thank you, councillors. I need to pass back to you for anything further with regard to this. Moving on to 10.4, this is the Taipei Grandstand project summary recommendation 1, that we receive the report. Happy for it to come from Councillor Gordon or someone in Taipei Ward. Councillor Gordon moving. Councillor Duncan seconding, receiving only at the stage. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you. Is there somebody from Assets that wishes to take us through this? Otherwise, I'll barrel on with some recommendations.
Your Worship, I'm online. Just a quick update to section 3, 3.1.
Yep.
Joanna Barnes-Wiley has advised today that she hopes to have a site visit at the end of April, beginning of May, but otherwise happy to take the report as read.
End of April, beginning of May.
That's correct.
Any questions of the report? And thank you, Galen. Councillor Duncan.
Yes, I have a question around the 3.2. There's a suggestion, I would like to know who from, that it would be wise to postpone any building work until the New Zealand Heritage Compliance position is understood. Yes, I would like to know where the suggestion comes from, and actually it surprises me that there was any building work scheduled at this stage. So just clarification, please.
This was a warning, and I'll pass back to Councillor Gordon in just a second. This was a warning that if we proceed, for instance, with a steel exoskeleton to strengthen it, that may not meet the requirements of heritage. Have I got that right, Councillor Gordon?
Correct, Your Worship. We passed a resolution to make sure that we weren't going to shoot ourselves in the foot, or the Taihape Heritage Society for that matter.
Are you satisfied, Councillor Duncan?
Well, not really. Sorry.
I think to answer Councillor Duncan's first question is who suggested it. It was a suggestion from staff that we don't do any work until we have that done with Heritage New Zealand, just in case the part of the heritage application is compromised by any work that we choose as, or you choose as elected members.
I think it was Peter. I think it was actually a suggestion by way of motion from Councillor Gordon. Initially, it was my understanding. I think he raised it as an item at council level, and there was a motion on the floor. So I think it was a formal process through council that suggested it. Thank you, and I see I've got a thumbs up from Councillor Gordon.
Councillor Wilson.
Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Absolutely endorsing that. This was a matter that was raised by Councillor Gordon when we looked at the various different strengthening options that were put in front of us. The question of steel and wood and ply and laminated beams and other things came up. Councillor Gordon actually spoke to it quite strongly that we should be looking at a position of where heritage may be, with whether or not a steel structure in that building would actually meet with their approval. So I think the decision to postpone the work at this stage would be a wise one, but just endorsing that what you said, Your Worship, this was raised by Councillor Gordon a couple of months ago.
Thank you. I've got online, I believe we've got Adina online, project manager. Adina, is there anything you wish to add to this discussion? Thank you, Adina.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to add that we had conversations with our architect, who then also talked to Heritage New Zealand directly about our plans with the steel frame, and they had no concerns around that. I think the recommendation to wait with the works had also to do with funding applications. So at the moment, the building is not listed, so you wouldn't be able to access the heritage specific funding either. So the thinking was that if it's going to be listed, then it might just help to postpone the actual start of construction. We can probably still continue the design work to detailed design because that has been commissioned. But then we would take it back to you, I think, with a report anyway, so that we can discuss the next steps at that stage.
A couple of points from this. First of all, in terms of Heritage New Zealand is not a funder. So they can add to a funding position by way of a supporting document to other funders, but they are in essence not a funder, which is unfortunate. They don't have a budget which they can literally put into these sorts of buildings. The second one from me is just a question. The report indicates the original unbudgeted expenditure, and my presumption is that that was transferred into what became a council budget of $1 million. Is that correct, or is that on top of the $1 million, the early unbudgeted expenditure?
The unbudgeted expenditure is included in the overall 1 million as per the project budget at the bottom of 4.2.
Thank you. I presume that was the case, and I meant to go back and check further. And the last point I make is that council has put in their long-term plan $1 million towards this. We've received in the report an estimation of at least 1.3 million, which with a suggestion that it could go higher. Council would need to either reach a decision to proceed on the basis of that further funding was guaranteed or highly likely, or make an active decision around that. In other words, we don't have the authority at this stage to go and start a construction for something without the adequate funds. That's as I understand the council processes with regard to that. Might pass through to Peter. Have I got this correct?
Yes, but I'll just double check that Galen is similarly agree.
Yes, I agree.
So we have a sum of money that sits in the account that we can go through all of the design processes and so on, but that needs to stop short of in excess of $1 million. So if we have a full design that comes back at say 1.5, then the options that would be open to us are one, either not to do it, or two, to look to an annual plan process or community funding or some other funding process to ensure that construction actually occurs. I just don't want anybody to go in with mixed understandings of the council position. Councillor Wilson, you're Chair of Assets. Any question or comment?
Just would like to go back to a comment that was made by Ms. Foley, and I don't know if she's still online, Adina. I'm not sure if you're still there or not. But if we look at recommendation 3, and you said just before that there was no issue with the steelwork with regards to heritage, and the fact that the issue with stopping the works was whether or not it may impede some future funding until this building is potentially listed, as it's not listed as yet. But recommendation 3 states that council agrees to postpone the work on the Taipei grid until compliance position of Heritage New Zealand is understood. These are two quite different things. So I'm not quite sure if recommendation 3 was to be moved and seconded and voted on, whether or not we're on the same page here. What is compliance of position of heritage? Compliance with Heritage New Zealand would indicate to me that we're waiting to check that what we're going to do is going to be okay. But is steel framework allowed then? Have we had that tick of approval with that? Because it was the best option for us when we first looked at it a few months ago, as with regards to cost.
There's no formal sign-off process by Heritage New Zealand with this, but I'm quite confident that our architect and our engineer have talked about it with experts in that field. But what I would probably suggest is that at the end of the design, which is not far away as I understand, I wouldn't then obviously, I think the idea is not to start construction work, and Galen may be able to correct me or maybe chip in.
Well, I think the point is that we can't agree to any construction work until we're in the position where we can actually fund it, as well as anything, and that's probably falls above everything else. Any further questions? Well, otherwise I'll deal with these recommendations. Recommendation 2 is noting that the council's contribution to the Taipei Grandstand project is $1 million in total. The council requests the chief executive provide staff support to the Heritage Trust Grandstand. So this presumably is around their applications for funding, and that's, I've got a nod from the chief executive. Look, I'll move that. Looking for a seconder to that. Councillor Wilson seconding it. I don't think I need to speak to it. This is about giving some staff time to assist the heritage group in their endeavours, essentially. Any other speakers to it?
Councillor Duncan.
Councillor Duncan?
I have a few questions around this, because if they are going to be the lead body for fundraising, I would have thought that they would request it rather than us providing support. Rather than it being our initiative, I would have thought it would have to come from them to ask for assistance. And that if we do provide staff support, that they should be aware that that's going to come out of the budget.
I take your point, Councillor. I had presumed that they had approached the Chief Executive and say, is there any way that you can support? Galen, are you able to give us any advice around this?
Staff have met on site with representatives of the Grandstand subcommittee about the fundraising, and there was discussion that we would assist them if we needed to. In some instances, funding may need to be under the name of the owner for the building, but we've agreed that we would work together.
Including if required, help in the recommendation.
Yeah, Councillor Belsham's raised the question around should there be wording if required. I'd be happy with that. Looking to the seconder, Councillor Wilson, be happy with. Look, I'll just amend the motion to say after fundraising, say if required. Yeah. Any further questions or views? Otherwise, I'll put that to the vote. Right, I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you very much. There's a third recommendation that Council agree to postpone any building work on the Taipei Grandstand until the compliance position of Heritage New Zealand is understood. For it to be my motion, I would suggest that Council agree to postpone any building work on the Taipei Grandstand until the compliance and financing positions, change that, until the compliance position of Heritage New Zealand and financing is understood. So this is just saying, hey, we'll go through all the work, and if we can tick both boxes, then we can actually start a construction. I'll move that.
Second that.
Councillor Belsham is seconding that. I don't think I need to speak to this. It's been covered, and it's largely covered by recommendations 1 and 2 anyway. Any other speakers to it? Anything from staff around the questioning of this?
No.
No, okay, thank you. Look, I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Motion is carried, thank you very much. Moving into 10.5, this is regard to the changing rooms at Te Matapihi Bulls Community Centre. Would somebody please, first of all, move the receipt of the report? Councillor Carter, thank you. Councillor Carter moving. Councillor Panapa, would you like to second it since it's in your patch? Thank you. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you. It's now received. Who wishes to take us through this as a report? Adina, thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. And I take the report as read. I just wanted to point out that we had a really good meeting with some of the community members that have these big events in Bulls. And what came out of it is basically the recommendation too, that we and the group would like to look at a feasibility study where we are looking at new different options of, how we could add a changing space in the car park area and at the back of the building without disturbing too much of the services and also taking away car parks. I think the options that have been endorsed, they're sort of on the small side and of the needs of the group. And so we in the group thought it might make sense to look at this from a different angle once again.
Yeah, Dina, as I understand it, and the report does illustrate it, there was a council recommendation to look at two different options. One was a substantially smaller option than what the community is wanting. And they've said, well, council could go down that path, but it would be unworkable for them as a school and community groups. And the public meeting has endorsed a step back and looking at this as a slightly different approach. Is that it?
Yes.
Okay. Councillor Dalgety, questions at this stage, unless somebody wants to put a recommendation on the table. Councillor Dalgety.
I'm just interested, with the likelihood of the area growing, will part of that feasibility consider the future population around Bulls and its roles in the schools, etc.?
Yeah, Councillor, this was a subject that I raised. I went along to the meeting as essentially an observer, and I was asked, and this was an issue that I raised and said, look, you know, could it be the total floor area may be the limiting factor in the future? And the answer is possibly yes, with growth. But like any town or organisation or school, you're always going to face these considerations. And whether, you know, schools or communities say, schools might, for instance, in the future say, well, actually, we need to split our school so you have a senior and junior prize giving. That's not the wishes of the school. There are some limitations in floor area, potentially illustrated around, you know, a huge kapa haka group. But there will always be a need for changing facilities at this facility. That was the view. So it did come up for discussion. Councillor Duncan.
Thank you. I think one of the main things that, from my experience in this area, is the limitation is actually on the size of the stage. It doesn't matter how big your school is or anything else, you can only get so many people onto the stage. So that is your maximum at any one time that need to be changing. So the stage size and floor space determines how big your changing rooms need to be. And then after that, it's a rotation. So that's a fact of stage work.
The community group took a slightly different approach to that, and they were suggesting that the changing facility needed to be a minimum from, check with Adina, but a minimum of around 200 people. We would not be able to fit 200 people on the stage.
Which is why I'm saying perhaps that that is a random number rather than anything based on stage work.
Yeah, but that was the component. Dina, do you wish to comment further?
Yeah, I just would like to add that I think the key outcome from our meeting was that there are various groups that are interested in a changing space, and it's not just the schools or not just one specific need. So it's a need of various groups that have various requirements, and the 200 was a bit of a maximum that was looked at, not so much a minimum. And I think, yeah, you're right. We're not going to consider changing, obviously, the stage size and the floor size of the town hall. That's not part of the study. It's just a changing room that hopefully can also be used for other things, you know, like staging areas and yeah.
Question, Councillor Belsham, but I will be looking for somebody to put a motion on the floor fairly soon. Councillor Belsham.
This is I guess a question if there is a potential recommendation put, but if there is a feasibility study undertaken with a consultant, have we got an idea on cost?
Sorry, can you just repeat that? If that was for me, my headphones just
Okay, so if
cut out.
there's a feasibility study undertaken,
Yeah.
have we got an idea on cost that looks, well, from the recommendations within the report, suggests that it's unable to be undertaken by staff capacity, so that it would be a consultant engaged to do this feasibility study? And what sort of costing are we looking at to actually undertake that?
We don't know the costings of the feasibility study at the moment. We do have a project manager engaged to help with that project because it has become, quite sizable. But I don't have any costings yet. This question was first to change the scope from detailed design of the 2 designs, which is that's a huge amount of cost that would occur.
All right. Just before I go to Arno for a second, by the way, my questions around numbers and requirements from the groups, the public meeting, all contained in sections 3.11 through to 3.19. Mr. Benedy.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think just to put a bit of reference on those numbers, the project management portion of the work is probably going to be in the region of about 50,000. I would imagine a concept design or feasibility study such as that would probably be north of 100,000, I would imagine. Just to put a bit of reference around that.
Thank you.
Councillor Carter.
I would like to make the move for recommendation 2 to approve, and the council approves staff to seek feedback regarding the larger community events holding groups.
So you're wishing to move this?
Yes, please.
Councillor Carter looking for a seconder to this. I'll second it, so it's up for discussion.
Councillor Panapa tried to second twice, Your Worship.
Sorry, thank you. Councillor Panapa, you're seconding. Sorry, I didn't see you in the shadow. You wish to speak to the motion?
Yes. It's not also the fact of a changing room, it's also a meeting space as well. With the meeting rooms that are upstairs for public meetings and having to close the front doors of the building so people can't get in, it makes it a bit tough for security wise. Whereas with the room at the back, it can be used for not only just a changing room, but also meeting rooms, assembly areas, as well as anything else. Now, with the scope that was put forward, was only sketches put forward by a group, which was not knowing what was under the ground or the do's and don'ts and where they could go. So with a professional group working on it, knowing what can be done and what can't be done, this could be a big help to resolve where we are and what we can do with the building.
Yeah, thank you. I'll open this up. This is going to be quite a discussion, I think, because I'm not sure that the expectation was to spend $100,000 on this sort of scope, and the report didn't indicate this. Opening up for questions. Councillor Belsham first.
Oh, just a question. The recommendation there reads to approve the scope of the Taipei additional changing room project, but that's specifically what it talks about. So it doesn't talk about meeting spaces or anything else, as Councillor Carter has just advised. But I'm speaking against this motion. The costs on this are starting to run out of control, and if it's indicated that it's going to cost north of $100,000 just to provide a feasibility report, this building has had an extensive amount of money spent on it, and quite frankly, my expectations are that the changing room spaces, are utilised with the space that's there. I think the community really needs to get on with what we've provided and realise that it is a cross-purpose space. It's not a hall, replacing the hall that was previously provided.
Councillors, this is a fairly big issue that is being raised. My intention is to let everybody be able to speak to this once, rather than 3 speakers for and or against and closing it off. You may not all wish to speak to it, but I will give you that opportunity unless a councillor invokes standing orders against me, in which case I'll rule that we'll go back to 3 speakers for and against. Councillors.
Councillor Wilson.
Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I think Councillor Belsham actually hit the nail on the head when he said it's cross-purpose building, designed to suit many necessary functions and not necessarily one. But I would point out that just over 13 kilometres up the road is a very, very large, significantly revamped Martin Memorial Community Citizens Hall in Martin. It is about to have toilets and things redone. It is about to have some in our planning is to have some significant car park space improvements. That is 13 kilometres up the road, and that hall will be big enough to facilitate these size numbers and more. And I think we have to look at this from a district-wide point of view, not solely from a Bulls point of view. Once upon a time, all schools had halls. Sometimes, sadly, they don't now. It may well be that the Bulls school and some of the schools down there grow to such a size that the Ministry of Education sees fit to build a big hall. I'm going to be probably supporting the motion alongside Mr. Belsham to speak against. Just pointing that out. Thank you.
Who else wishes to speak? Councillor Dalgety, Councillor Duncan, there'll be myself as well. Councillor.
I also am not going to wish to go ahead with this as it's written there. I would like some more definite costing around this feasibility study. I feel that someone plucking a figure out of the air is not adequate for us to make a decision on.
Thank you. Councillor Duncan.
Thank you. The design included an appropriate space for changing, and it was changed during the building. So the promise to the community was that there would be changing rooms, and at the moment there aren't any really of any workable size. I think that what we're looking at is a request from the community that has got bigger and more ambitious than it perhaps needs to be. I think going back to my point before about the size of the stage, if you had an appropriate sized changing room for that area that was not necessarily going to be anything else, but just fulfill the promise that we made to the community, then it would come in at a much lower size. And it says staff in this recommendation. It doesn't say anything about external people. So yes, I don't think the recommendation is appropriate. And I still think that we have an obligation to the community, but whether it was put into a 2 or 3 year plan rather than just, or even a 5-year plan, given that they do have a wonderful facility there, but in this way, it needs to be altered, I believe.
Yeah, thank you. I'll speak to this, and I imagine there are a number of councillors nervous because, first of all, going into this meeting, I don't think we had an advanced knowledge or expectation that we could be looking at over $100,000 for a feasibility study. So the scope of that was probably unknown to us. There have been some interesting points raised by councillors speaking ahead of me around the widening apparently of the scope, and I'm not sure, Councillor Carter, I hadn't heard anything within the scope previously around the need for further meeting rooms, for example. I'm wondering that, and process kicks in here around our requirement for an expenditure of this size to go out to an annual plan consideration. In other words, when you start talking over $100,000 for a scoping document and construction that comes as a consequence, could come as a consequence to that, you're suddenly talking fairly substantial figures. And I would think at that sort of level of expenditure, it would be reasonable for the community to have a say by way of an annual plan process, where people can literally question the merits and their view with regard to this. Because I take on board Deputy Mayor's comments. This has changed from what was originally a reasonably low cost, $100,000 total project, to something that is obviously far more substantial. So I won't be supporting the recommendation as it stands because of these changes. Any other councillors wishing to speak? Councillor Gordon.
Yes, thank you, Worship. I'm speaking against. Having said that, I would like to see an ongoing tally, probably not the right word, of use and of comments and of needs. I think we're really becoming, council in this project has become a bit of a whipping boy for what hasn't been funded in other sections of the community. And I'm pointing the finger really at the Ministry of Education and Schools. I mean, I live in a town where our school has a huge hall. In fact, Taihape has got that many halls, we barely know what to do with them. And so here we are in Bulls, we're trying to be all things to everybody. And that's why this is a multi-use centre. Having said that, needs do change. And so I'd like to see, if we're going to do anything, it's just basic information gathering about what works and what doesn't. One of the councillors brought up the fact around using meetings and security and locking front doors. Well, if that's an issue, that needs to be flagged and we need to find a solution. But I don't see at this stage that spending this amount of money is necessarily going to be the answer. So I'll be voting against at this stage, but I still wish our council to continue to gather information. Thank you.
Any further speakers? Councillor Panapai.
I definitely support the idea of bringing this project to a close. I mean, the requirements of the community that were presented to them long before many of us were elected to council, those needs were not met, and it cost us a councillor leaving because of the disagreement in terms of how council has handled this Matapihi project from the beginning. I think $100,000, and I don't know why it would cost $100,000 just for the feasibility study, but $100,000 is a small price to pay considering the millions that have been spent to provide a fit-for-purpose facility. I would ask us to really seriously consider what value we place on Bulls as the gateway into our district from the south, and rather than expecting Bulls community to leave Bulls to go and access other facilities, shouldn't we be encouraging our partners to the south and other areas to come to the Bulls area to see our state-of-the-art facilities and use those facilities for things beyond just Bulls. And in terms of the use of that room, a room is a room is a room. If the room is built, we can use it for whatever purpose we deem fit, whether it's an extra meeting room, whether it's whatever it is. But to say that it's not, or it's outside of the scope of this project to say that this room could be used as a meeting room just clouds the issue. Rather, we are looking at what can we do to make this building the most usable, fit for purpose building as it was considered or designed in the first place. And irrespective of whatever decisions were made over this period to that the building is not used or is not fit for purpose, let's put that aside and let staff do what they need to do to find what is the best pathway forward to enhance this building to the best that it can be. I think that's all I can say at this
time. Any further speakers to this? I'm just wondering, and I'm not going to speak again, but I'm going to ask the Chief Executive a couple of questions here. Are we now in a contractual position that we have engaged somebody to do this work that will happen regardless as per the contract that we've entered into at this sort of price range? Where do we sit contractually as an organisation with regard to this?
I would just double check with Arno about that, but I don't believe we've entered into any contract other than for project management at this point. What I would add, though, Your Worship, is that should recommendation not go ahead, should recommendation 2 not go ahead, then we do revert to the former recommendation that was outlined in section 2.1, which is to do the detailed design for options 3 and 5A. Now that comes at a cost too, of course.
So just advice to me procedurally here. So thank you for that first part of the advice. The second part of the advice, as you did right, that unless there is a change by council today, you have a standing order to go ahead and do work on 2 separate buildings, 2 separate building sizes. What would happen if this motion failed? We'd revert back to that unless there was a subsequent motion on the floor to refer it to, for instance, to an annual plan process or some other mechanism. Is that correct?
That's correct, Your Worship, yes. I do note that the project manager, the head of our PMO, is online, Jess, that may add some more information to you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, councillors, it's taking a little bit of time, but we absolutely need to understand process here. Jess or Adina, do you wish to comment further before I go back to rights of reply?
Yes, please, Your Worship. I wanted to confirm what the Chief Executive has said, that we haven't entered into any contracts apart from project management, and that is a contract that can be cancelled if the project is paused. However, I wanted to note that we've talked a lot about the cost of the feasibility study. Our initial estimate, and we have not procured a consultant for it, but the detailed design of the 2 options would be in the hundreds of thousands. That's the previous resolution.
Thank you. Yes, we've got that. Adina, do you wish to add anything further? Thank you. Unless there's another speaker, I'll go back to the mover with right of reply.
Thank you. As been pointed out, the staff are going through the process of doing feasibility studies on options 3 and 5A. What was thought by the user groups was whether there was a better way of going around it, or better putting those 2 together and making a better option that would work better. So that's virtually what the group was all about. Instead of being stuck with their sketches as to whether the staff could come up with a way better idea or a better concept, having known what the limitations are of the building and the area around it. Totally agree with Councillor Panapa, what he was saying about the use of the building and the promises made for the building. And yeah, it's just a matter of helping the community out and getting a facility that was offered or asked for and not getting what the result was. So this is just to make the building better, otherwise you're going to end up with a building that won't get used. Thank you.
Thank you. We've had a right of reply. I now must put it to the vote. Those in favour of the motion, could you please raise your hands? 1, 2, 3. Those against the motion, can you please raise your hands? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The motion, as I read it, fails. So that takes us back to the existing motion. There may well be a councillor that wishes to put a motion on the table, and I'll take some guidance here also from staff. So at the moment you have something that is on the table that exists that the community are feeling could be a waste of time in terms of some of that work to be done. They're saying that a small space is unworkable. The response back was to do a much wider business study at the costs outlined. The options, as I see it, for councillors to consider are: one, literally to pause the thing and refer it to an annual plan, or to alter it in some shape and in terms of scope. Councillors, I'm looking for a view here. Peter, do you wish to give us any guidance with regard to this? I'm trying to put all the options on the table.
Yeah, Your Worship, thank you. I do wonder, from listening to elected members discuss this, whether, and given the uncertainty around the unbudgeted costs that we will either incur to do a detailed design as per the current resolution, Jess pointed out that was $400,000, or the feasibility study, which was in excess of 100,000, whether it may be prudent for council to ask us or ask me to come back with some more finite numbers around either the costs for a detailed design or the cost for a feasibility study, and then you may choose to how you may wish to proceed from there.
Yeah, which would be effectively pausing and coming back to council ahead of an annual plan position and asking, councillors may wish to take that on board. I have speakers, Councillor Gordon, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Gordon, I'll take you first.
Mine is a question, Your Worship, and it's really to both Councillor Carter and perhaps the Chief Executive or one of his staff. My question is, are you actually satisfied that we have enough information right now on current use to fully advise any feasibility study? Have we really got enough detail to make that feasibility study or whatever process we have as valuable as we could make it? Or are we just chasing shadows? Well, I've got my doubts at the moment.
Councillor Wilson, I'll go to you. Unless you put a motion on the floor, I will put one on the floor.
I would be supporting you to put one on the floor, Your Worship. But what I would just like to say is I think what the Chief Executive has said is correct. I think what Councillor Dalgety said before about numbers being plucked out of the air, they seem to be being plucked out of the air. And the reality of these numbers are, if it's 150,000, if it's 300 to 400,000, the outcome of that may be an action that will be several $1 million. And, you know, do we have the appetite, and I may be premature in saying that, but do we have the appetite to be spending that level of money on this building? And I'm not sure that spending the level of money that's been indicated here, which we can't be sure of, so I would be, again, endorsing what the Chief Executive said, that we actually get some more firmer numbers. But would we be spending this money, and when it comes out of it, everyone turns around and goes, oh, we're not spending $2 or $3 million, which is, I'm only plucking figures out of the air there, in which case we've most of that initial money. Just erring on the side of caution there.
Thank you. Look, what I'll put on the floor, and I'm suggesting, and I'm doing this on the hop, and I'll speak to it in a second, I'd move that the council defer the decision of the council meeting of such and such a date, so that it has a sequence that refers back until a further subsequent report on functional or costing options is available with regard to that. There might need to be some tidying up of words around that. But what I'm saying is essentially there's been a whole lot of information that has come as a little bit of a shock. If we do nothing, we end up spending money on something that the community doesn't want. So I accept and probably admire the principles that originally came from the community to say, let's just don't do that work. Let's concentrate on something slightly different, or a single larger building room. Don't do the work on a smaller earning. I'm not sure that spending $100,000 is a better option than, for instance, spending $100,000 on actually building something. But I'm essentially saying, let's just pause, let's get some more information, and the Chief Executive may wish to come back to us with regard to some scope around that, but I'm not sure we're in the position to discuss it much further at the moment. A comment from the Chief Executive.
I can't comment, Your Worship, because you've got a proposed resolution. I have a view on that. But I've given my thoughts for you to consider. I think your resolution covers the thinking that I recommended to members.
Okay. So look, I will move that we defer the decision as per the recommendation up there, looking for a seconder to that.
I'll do that.
Councillor Belsham, look, I think I've pretty much said it in terms of, I think there is merits on doing something here, but at the moment I think we're dancing around with information we don't quite have, and we're in danger of either wasting money on something that is not wanted, or spending a lot of money on something that we're not quite sure of the details of. Looking for other speakers. Right, I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour?
Sorry, Your Worship, could you please just read out the...
sorry. The recommendation 3 is that Council defer the decision made on the 28th of October 2021. This is Resolution 21 RDC 375 until a further subsequent report on functional and costings options is available. So I think that gives the essence of essentially pushing a pause button and not enacting the decisions that have previously been made.
Your Worship, I might just ask for Arno or Jess or Adina to confirm that's a workable resolution for us, please.
Yes, happy with that, thank you.
Adina? Thank you, I've got a thumbs up from Adina. and Arno, who matters most.
Yeah, that looks good.
That's the Chair of Finance. Right, look, I will put that to the vote. Please raise your hands, those in favour. Those against? Carried. I think clearly we need to do a little bit more work and thinking on with regard to this matter. Thank you very much. We'll push on to 10.6, the Project Management Office Report. Recommendation 1, that we receive the report, please. Councillor Ash moving, Councillor Wilson seconding. Those in favour, to my eye. Granted, thank you. Carried. Recommendation 2. Who's going to take us through this, or do you want me to just push through some recommendations? The Chief Executive of Staff. Who's? Jess, is it your space?
It is, thank you. Usually we run through and pause for any questions on each project. So the first one is the Mangaweka Bridge replacement, which has a resolution attached to it. Are there any questions on the project update?
Mangaweka Bridge, take questions. No questions.
Great. Martin.
Sorry, there are 2. Right, sorry, I jumped in too quickly here. I think Councillor Dalgetty might have been first.
And Councillor Gordon.
And Councillor Gordon. Councillor Dalgetty.
Hi, Jess. I'm just wondering if you can just give us a sense beyond the next month's forecast of what other work has to be done before this has before the bridge can be opened. And there's no mention here of working with iwi, and I hope that there has been some work with iwi. Can we just enlighten us of what's happening there, please?
Yeah, absolutely happy to. Our conversations and engagement with iwi are wrapped up in the tasks forecast for this month, progress planning for shifting traffic to the new bridge and formal opening. The activities that are required before we can formally open the bridge, we need to do a cutover of the road, and we need to progress with the artwork and to plan the opening ceremony.
And from me, Jess, opening date is unchanged. And what is it?
We don't have a set opening date yet. And the completion date in the contract, and that's been reported, is June. So we are still tracking well ahead of program.
Is there any opportunity to bring it further forward than June?
It's dependent on a large number of things, least of all COVID. So we don't have a fixed date yet. At this stage, we've got no indications that it won't be open before the end of June.
Thank you. Councillor Gordon.
Yeah, a couple of questions from me. Well, some of them have already been answered. That was with respect to the cutover for the road. So my question was going to be, given the complexity on the east side of the bridge, are we going to be actually having traffic over the bridge prior to the official opening? Because it's very difficult to form a road where there's already a current road.
I understand.
Yeah.
Sorry. So no, we don't plan to have traffic on the bridge before the formal opening.
Okay.
Peter, you're in charge of staffing as to who speaks on these items. I do note that Mr. Waugh is online. Do you wish him to give any updates or advice?
I was going to offer the same, actually, Your Worship. So recalling, of course, that this project is managed by Manawatu District Council, and what Jess has been providing is effectively the information that we've been provided by them. So it'd be good for Hamish to answer any questions or to offer the floor to him. So thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Waugh.
Thank you, Mayor Andy. Yeah, so Jess, I think, has covered off the program and the progress to date. As Jess has already outlined, we are aiming towards the project completion at the end of June. if we are able to bring that forward in terms of all of the components of the project, we will. But we are still working with our contractor and also with representatives from Ngāti Hawiti in terms of bringing all of those final components together. That also includes the landscape and planting and the like as well. So we're very much on the home run, but we're not, sorry, on the home straight, but we're not there yet. So I'm happy to ask any specific questions if Jess doesn't have them contained in the report, but in your hands, I think, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Gordon.
Yes, in the report it notes that you were finishing scour protection this month. Given that we've just had an 800 cubic flood down the river, how did it stand up? I'm sorry, Councillor Gordon. I don't have the specifics of that. I haven't been informed of any problems. That's not to say that it hasn't had some movement, but I can certainly inquire with the projects team and come back to you on that specifically, if that's of interest. Thank you.
Councillor Dalgety, coming back to you.
Yes, it's a question back to you, Your Worship. I'm just aware that this is the bridge not being opened is costing some businesses significant amounts of money. Would there be appetite for some of those businesses to be approached directly? Approached
directly with regard to
an update, an update, on a one-to-one, business-to-business basis.
Look, I'm quite happy to do that, or that could be an approach that staff make to those each individual business, whichever would be the better option in terms of that connection. But I think we can take that conversation offline a little, I think. I just remind councillors that the date of completion was always forecasted in July, I think, not June. But I take on board your comment, and as always, if any party wish to have a conversation with myself or a ward councillor, they have the right to do so. Any further questions with regard to this?
Just one, Andy. Worship, sorry. In regards with the project budget in the report, it's stating that the recommendation following is to include to fully expend that budget. But then the line under that says there may be other costs that are yet to be known, and another paper will be brought to council in April. What's the confidence level of retaining the current Waka Kotahi budget? I guess that's a question to staff.
Thank you. That was a question I would raise as well.
That'd be one I would ask for Hamish's comment, please, Your Worship.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Biggs. I guess we've included that in there just in terms of the final wrap up and project completion. Bearing in mind this is a multi-year, fairly large-scale project for both of our districts. We've had a challenging construction timetable, and I think that, I don't like to use COVID as an excuse, but it certainly hasn't helped. We've had significant cost increases and changes along the way. I'm not expecting that if the final price should be there or thereabouts in terms of the approved Waka Kotahi budget. But until we have the final works done and completed, we're unable to put an exact dollar figure on that, but I'm not expecting significant additional cost. We've captured all of that through the variations to date.
And I'd raise a question around this, Mr. Waugh. So, we get a regular update with regard to these capital work projects. And to my memory, virtually every report that has come through was to say that we were on course, on budget with regard to this activity. And when you start talking about significant things and the period of COVID, these significant variations have arisen when and should they have been made available to council? I'm sorry to be blunt, but that's the question.
No, thank you, Your Worship. And I think we've done an internal review and worked closely with the Project Management Office and Jess and Arno through this. We've picked up essentially through our project reporting some areas where it could have been better. We certainly do have a robust tracking of the project variations and the contractual correspondence to date. Fair to say we were also chasing some of the contracting consortia in terms of finalising some of these prices throughout. And to be honest, as late as the end of, early March, we were getting the finalised prices there. One of the areas that we tracked was sort of our internal process of tracking against the RDC purchase order compared to tracking against the approved Waka Kotahi budget. And so we've identified some improvements in that project tracking going forward, which we accept as an oversight.
Okay, thank you. Just one further question with regard to the Chief Executive and the LTP. Where does that sit in terms of our LTP position? These variations, are they able to be accommodated within our LTP position with regard to this activity?
So I'll need Jess just to 100% confirm, Your Worship. My understanding is that the position of this paper is the same as Council's LTP capital position. We're not asking for any more money than the current LTP capital provision.
Yeah, thank you. That was, I think, my expectation, but I really needed to have it confirmed.
Jess, got that right?
Right. Thank
Correct,
you.
yes. Oh, pardon, if I can speak for a moment. Our 2018 LTP budget was 4.9 million and the Waka Kotahi budget is 4.95 million. And so the resolution seeks to formalise that we rely on the Waka Kotahi budget internally as the project budget.
Okay, thank you. Councillors, what I want to do is finish with this item and then take a 10-minute break. And please be aware, councillors, if we run after 5:30, I will be stopping council. So whether in the 10-minute break, staff wish to look at any reprioritisation, and I'll look at potential timeframes. With regard to this item, the project managership, would somebody please receive the reports? Councillor Wilson moving, Councillor Gordon seconding. Those in favour, please, show of hands. Thank you, carried.
You've already done it.
Yeah, I've been told I've done it. Sorry, you're right.
I'm happy to move recommendation 2.
Thank you. Moving recommendation 2 that the Chief Executive is authorised to expend the budget 4953, etc. Councillor Wilson moving.
Seconding.
Seconded.
He is the seconder, Councillor Felsham moved
Thank
it.
you. Must be needing a break myself. Okay, I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Carried. Councillors will break for 10 minutes, resuming just before 3:15. So we're actually in motion at 3:15, please. And thank you.
Just a reminder, we will remain live for 10 minutes. So if you want to take your video and your audio off, and then we'll resume it in 10 minutes.
Thanks. I'll just have a look at this, where we're at, and try line now. Thank you. Moving on to, I'm going to hopefully we can run through these reasonably quickly. Jess, are you available? No, if not, I'll just push on and Arno can. Okay. Martin to Bulls Wastewater, any questions around that one?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
Any questions around that one, councillors? I need to move through these quickly.
Councillor Lambert.
Councillor Lambert.
Just very quickly, I mentioned that sign that was blocking my gateway. I see it's come down and not been put back up. Has it been put back up? And if they want to place it in my property, just get in touch and I can do it. I'll give them a hand, show them where to put it.
Thank you.
Moving on, Lake Waipu, Ratana Wastewater Project. Anything that there's no big red arrows or anything in there? Anything there? No. Next one, Bulls Bus Lane in Town Square. There's some questions around potential changes. Jess or the team, do you want to say anything in that space?
Just that if you have been past Bulls over the last week, the lawn is done and the barrier fencing has been removed, which we have iwi blessing to use the town square and the bus lane before the artwork is installed, and after the artwork there will be the opening ceremony, and there are some relatively minor optimizations to be made to the bus lane before it is used.
Okay, anything further on that, councillors? I think everybody's aware of those issues. Councillor Duncan.
Thank you. My eyes pricked up when I saw the risk arrow. It says RDC has come to a verbal agreement with the landowner of the town square and work is continuing as scheduled. I'd be interested to know the verbal agreement. Is that something that we'd be privy to?
I'm happy to speak to that. A portion of the town square is not owned by council, it's owned by a private company. And we have been going back and forward to finalise the lease for that, for our town square. We reached verbal agreement on our use of it and are going through the final sign off of it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The risk arrow reflects the complaint about the set out of the bus lane.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Moving along, Taipei Grandstand. Councillors, I think we've discussed this at length today, and we've got a series of resolutions in there, so I think I can move on. Not wanting to bully you, but we will. Martin Industrial Park and Rail Hub. Anything there? Please, I may be pushing through some of the stuff that you always have the opportunity to come back to us through email and through to staff. Martin Water Strategy, these are the sub-project of the bore, etc. Questions there? The Regional Treatment Plant Consenting Program. Excuse me. I think that this is covered in some of the in committee report. Is that correct? I'm getting a nod from Jess to say that's the case. Thank you. Which leads us to the miscellaneous items. Is there anything in there? Some of them are just advice items of work that has been done as well. No, thank you. I'll push on. The next one is 10.7, the request to become a guarantor council with local government funding agency. This is a given because we have discussed this and the need to get to a position of over $20 million worth of borrowing, which would essentially be a requirement, as I understand it. Is that correct, Mr. Toon?
If we wish to borrow from LGFA, yes.
Correct. And we will need to. Would you like to move?
I'm happy to move the reception.
Thank you. Seconded by? Councillor Wilson, second. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you. That was the report to not so much reception, but the request to become a guarantor. Recommendation 2, that it is confirm its intention to become a guaranteeing member, LGFA, and delegates the authority to the acting chief executive and councillors. What I would urge council not to do is actually name councillors' names. What I'd urge councillors to do is name a position, because otherwise when we come to an election, you'll get a change of names, or you could well get a change of names. So I'm happy to move recommendation 2 with the names be the Mayor and Chair of Finance. Does staff have any issue with that as a change?
Not with that. I'll just point out that the recommendation we've got on the screen says acting chief executive. In the agenda papers, it doesn't have the word acting. I don't know if you just want to draw attention to that, but no, I think your other suggestion's fine.
Yeah. Anything further?
Is acting chief executive required?
It's just because Peter can't be here on site to sign, and we need the documents signed.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's got to be, it's fairly urgent then. Right, okay.
It's got to be next week, yeah. So if you,
Thank you.
so the mayor and
Clarified.
are you both available next week to sign?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, great, yeah.
Right, I'm moving, looking for a seconder to that. Councillor Belsham seconding. Any questions or views from councillors? Otherwise, I'll put it to a vote. No, put it to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you very much. 10.8. This is the Wellington Road Council Flats re-roofing and insulation. Could somebody first of all receive it? Councillor Dalgety, Councillor Lambert, those in favour? Aye, carried. Jess, are you going to take us through this?
Yes, I am. Thank you. We have already approved, we have separated the work for the re-roofing into 4 stages and approved the undertaking of stage 2. However, there is some advantages in carrying out all 4 stages now. That means overspending on the budget by $300,000. However, we have another capital expenditure item that is no longer required for the value of $300,000. So we're proposing to substitute the work in. This will, pardon, Your Worship.
So this was discussed at assets?
No, this has arisen since assets.
Okay. Thank you. Any further advice? I'd be interested to know, first of all, what work we have in our LTP that you're actually wishing to substitute funds for. I believe it was cemeteries. Is that correct?
Correct. It was an allowance for land acquisition for a cemetery expansion.
Questions, Councillor Dalgety.
Sorry, just along similar lines, I can't recall what's happening around the cemetery, please. Can you just remind me?
Yes.
I don't have that information to hand. I'm sorry.
Okay. No.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I can answer that question. So the original idea was for us to extend the Ratner Cemetery. If you can remember, a piece of land became available earlier this year, and we have already completed that work, which means the 300,000 next year would not be needed any further.
Awesome.
Just a question.
Councillor Belsham.
So this work is required to bring these council flats up to a certain standard, up to a healthy home standard? Correct,
yes. And also the roofs are in need of replacing due to their condition as well. It's twofold.
So there's no question that we can't do it. It has to be done.
Correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Councillor Wilson, Chair of Assets.
Thank you, Worship. Happy to move recommendation 2 and 3 together.
Thank you. Looking for a seconder to that before you speak to it. Thank you, Councillor Lambert. Do you wish to speak to it?
Yeah, look, very briefly, Jess is 100% right. The roofs on these buildings are in very poor condition. We need to get them up to healthy home standards. They are vaulted ceiling flat, so the only way you can insulate is to remove the roofs anyway. This notes in here that insulation will also be installed as part of the re-roofing project. It's got to be done. It's work's got to be done. I'm thankful that Councillors managed to find the additional $300,000 elsewhere in the budget, and we're not looking at an unbudgeted expense here. And let's push on and get it done. Like so many of these things, it will never get any cheaper, and the opportunity to do all of this together makes perfect sense.
Oh, okay. Any further speakers to the motion? I'll speak to this. Look, I'll support this. I don't quite agree with the sort of principle of, oh, we haven't used money here, so therefore it's just free money. But it is work that we do need to do. We do need to comply. So I will support it. Any further speakers? Any right of reply?
Yes, Your Worship. Just noting that at the end of recommendation 3, it says the council notes 300 funding will be brought from an unspent budget in 2003, not suggesting free money, but smart use of our already existing budgets.
All right, I take your point. I was being cute. Right, I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? Carried. Thank you very much. That moves us through to the views on government's proposal to remove exotic forests from the ETS. I know this is of real interest.
Sorry, Your Worship, I think we've skipped recommendation 3.
Ah, you're right. Sorry. We need to, no, 2 and 3 were done together.
Oh, that's all right.
Yeah, so we did do them. 10.9, the views on government response to remove exotic forests from the ETS. Councillor Gordon, you have spent an incredible amount of time on this and attended all the Zoom meetings. And I know Councillor Dalgety and Councillor Duncan have also spent time on this. Councillor Gordon, do you wish to comment?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I think government is signalling that it doesn't wish to have widespread exotic forestry used in permanent sinks. I think it's a very complex space. I think there's potential wriggle room there, as we saw in yesterday's Zoom meeting, around long-term forests that are managed on what's described as a continuous cover basis, using either exotic or native species. I don't think we should get too hung up on the word exotic. It's really how this land is managed. So possibly, no, I'm not speaking to a motion yet, but possibly the recommendation 3 with some amendments might be the best outcome. I'll leave it there for the moment.
Yeah, just remember, councillors, this is work that we agreed to partially fund. Originally came out of Tararua District Council and Wairoa councils, etc. My reading of it is probably also that the best option on the floor is option 3, from listening in on the Zooms. But there's not I'd like somebody to put a motion on the floor, so we're speaking to something specific here. Yeah. So there's a few speakers. Could I suggest that one of the speakers puts up their hand if they're prepared to put a motion on the floor, and then we're speaking to something? Is anybody prepared to Thank you, Councillor Dalgety. Do you wish to put a motion on the floor?
Just checking we've received the report, have we?
You could do that one first. Yes, you're right.
Please. And then I would like to recommend option 3 as presented there.
So would you like to move recommendation 1 and recommendation 2, option 3?
Yeah, option 3, yes.
Yep. Have we a seconder to that? Councillor Gordon will take you. Thank you for the work that you've done on this. Councillor Dalgety, do you wish to speak to them?
Oh, I just, it is incredibly complex and it has been a big learning curve for me, to be honest. I probably, having listened to the webinar, actually changed my mind. I see that the underutilized Maori land, you know, if we get there is an ability here for that land to be more utilized, and I think there will be economic benefit to some disadvantaged New Zealand if we can get this right.
Thank you, Councillor Lambert.
I was just going to say I fully endorse option 3 too, bearing in mind it is a constantly moving and changing environment and will continue to be so. So at this stage, option 3, I think is the best way to go.
Councillor Gordon.
Thank you, Worship. Yes, I wonder if I'd been moving the motion, I possibly would have substituted prevent at the beginning for place limits on. It might give us and the local government New Zealand group a little bit more wriggle room because it's such a moving feast. But unless the mover is happy to go there, I'm not going to rock the boat too hard.
Well, you've got an option of pushing an amendment if you want, but I'll go to the mover. Do you wish to
I'm
alter?
happy with that.
Thank you.
Can we just change the words, please? Place limits on. So there's Mr. Benedict's showing us his high-speed typing skills.
It was actually.
Was Ash, was it?
Yes.
I was looking at you typing. I was thinking, whoa. Thank you. Any further speakers to it? And I'm presuming that the seconder is happy with the change of words. Thank you. You wish to have a right of reply? I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. So that carries both of those. 10.10, the scooter rack installation at Te Marapihi. And I am young enough to understand what a scooter is. Would somebody like to receive the reports? Councillor Carter moving, seconded by Councillor Wilson. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you. Who's going to take us through this?
That'll be me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship. A quick summary. The Bulls Community Committee requested the installation of a bespoke scooter rack, and they also asked for council to fund it. So it will be about $1,000 to create or to produce it. And they would ideally like to have it in front of the building, just at the main entrance. In the report, staff suggests that it might be better around the corner as we are looking at installing a book returns cabinet, an external book returns cabinet. And if we look at some off-the-shelf product that we can buy that's much smaller, that will fit in next to the book return. And those are the two options that we would like to put to council for a decision.
And just making a note that at the Bulls Community Committee meeting of the other night, their view was that it's a rack containing 8 scooters to be racked in front of the building. So they have a slightly opposing view here. I have Councillor Gordon, Councillor Wilson, Councillor Gordon.
Just a comment, Your Worship. I think it might be worthwhile if staff talk to their Taihape peers. The community board and the library staff in Taihape went down exactly the same route, and there may well be some learnings. I'll just leave it there.
Are you able to advise us as to what those learnings could be?
Look,
making a decision.
Putting the rack is only the first step. Then there's the locks, because people want to walk off with scooters while the kids are inside, and then there's all the other stuff that goes with it. So, yeah, we need longer to discuss it than the time available here.
Presumably, locks are the responsibility of the person owning the scooter, surely.
Yes, they were, Your Worship, but it all got pretty untidy. So I'm just thinking about the front of our new building and what the look is that we are wishing to attain.
Thank you. Councillor Duncan.
Further to that, thank you, Your Worship. Further to that, they get extremely messy, and you'll get scooters all over the pavement. The locks actually were supplied by the staff, and they were to bring them back once they'd finished using them. That, of course, as you imagine, did not happen. So I would suggest that wherever the rack is not in sight of State Highway 1, and it isn't under a veranda where people are going to walk around a corner. So I would have to say that the option where it's to the left of the main doors, which is on the side, I assume that's on the side road, and Bulls would be the best option of these two.
Go to Councillor Wilson and then Councillor Carter. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Your Worship. A question for Arno, just looking for a little bit of clarification here, that there's an off-the-shelf option, there's the bespoke option. Does the bespoke option not fit beside the proposed book return bin? Is that what I'm hearing?
That is correct. It's 2.4 meters long. It's too large. It just won't fit anyway but in the front.
Okay, so further to that, the proposed book return is on the State Highway 1 side under the veranda, correct?
Yeah, correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I thought that the bespoke one was going to be made by a Bulls company. Yeah.
Right on it.
Councillor Carter. Yeah.
Yes, you're right, Mirandi, that the bespoke one is made by Roadrunners. At the moment, the scooters are left at the front of the building, as you were saying, all over the footpath, but with having this facility for them to use, they may get put into it. Having the scooter rack around the corner facing State Highway, facing the green space, I can't see that being used for the fact that the kids can't see it when they go in the door. I would like to move recommendation 2 to start with.
Okay, you're moving recommendation 2, looking for a seconder to that. This is that we cover the cost and installation, so it's not on that Bulls Community Committee. Councillor Duncan, you're seconding. Do you wish to speak further to it?
No, thank you.
Any other speakers? Otherwise, I'll put that to a vote. Right, I'll put it to vote. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you very much. And you're signalling that you wish to move a recommendation 3.
The first part of the recommendation.
Looking for a mover?
That's me.
Seconder? Councillor Gordon, you wish to speak to it?
That is the design that they've looked at, and enhancing the front of the building with the bull on the scooter rack itself. So it adds to the build itself with the name, or no name, but an image of the bull underneath the Tamara P sign, which is a plus, I believe. Yes, talking about locks, there is a facility on this particular model that there are holes in there that padlocks can be put in if required later. So they're looking ahead of themselves. Thank you.
This would be against the recommendation of staff. Peter.
Sorry, Your Worship. That's what I was going to say is that's not the recommendation of staff for the concerns we've raised in the report. And really option 3, and I know that's not what Councillor Carter's recommended, but recommendation 3 really allows us to go back to the Bulls Community Committee to, I guess, for want of a better word, negotiate where best to address our concerns and theirs. We have not had the opportunity to do that before this report.
Okay. On that basis, any further speakers? Right or reply?
Not necessarily, I don't think. Thank you.
Put it to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you.
If I may, Your Worship, there is an invoice here that I've got a copy of, and the quotation lasts for this month. Prices will be going up by at least 10% regarding the price of aluminium and everything else. If an order number can be produced today for them to work on, the price will be fixed at $934.61.
Okay, look, I'll let Peter talk to you offline with regard to that item.
Thank you.
That's his discussion. Sorry, Carol.
I was just asking. It's very hard to judge whether it was.
Okay. Ash is wondering whether the vote was carried. I did put it to the vote. Those in favour, just to formalise it. Those against, carried. Thank you. Yeah, I can just see this heap of hands, that's all. Right, where does that take us through? The reports for information. Now, item 11.1, my view in terms of time with regard to this is, Arno, would you be happy if this becomes a tabled item where feedback comes to you?
Perfect, Your Worship. Yeah, thank you.
So I think we would need to receive it, obviously. Peter, that's okay with you? Thanking you. I'll move the receipt, seconded to that.
Yes, I'll second it.
Councillor Ash beat you to it. Councillor Ash seconding. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you. That deals with the reports. The minutes from committees, could somebody please move the receipt of these as a block? Councillor Wilson, and who else did I get? Councillor Lambert seconding. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Recommendation from the Martin Community Committee that the Martin Community Committee recommend to Council that signage is installed throughout the district which shows correct, up-to-date, relevant contact details to aid users to report faults or issues. I'm not quite sure around the scope of this. Could somebody take me further?
I have recently spoken to the chair of that committee and she said they should follow it up with this at an operational level. That was in the last couple of days, so she's happy if that just gets left.
So do we actually need a recommendation? I'm just very concerned about the very loose wording nature of this.
Yeah, I gave her that feedback when I first got it and that was when she updated me, so yeah,
we can delete this item as it stands. Right, we'll remove that, thank you. Recommendation from the Hunterville Community Committee. The committee requests that Council approve a carry forward from 2021 of 100% of the annual allocation of the Small Projects Fund. We're only talking about $857 here to the 21-22 financial year. Would somebody like for Hunterville? Thank you, Councillor Dalgetty, you're moving. Seconded, Councillor Lambert. Any discerning idea? Otherwise, I'll put it straight to a vote. I'll put it to vote. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you. Would somebody like to move that we move into public excluded?
I'll move.
Councillor Belsham moving, Councillor Wilson seconding. Show of hands, those in favour? Thank you. For those that have been online, thank you very much. Have you already excluded? Thank you very much.